In other words, Jesus is saying, I came to bring you abundant life now, here on earth, that you would be filled with me and everything that you need to navigate every day and every week and every month and every season, because you have me and I never run dry. Well, have you ever walked through the wrong door? That's not fun, right? A few years back, my father and me and my brother went to go see a zombie thriller film, and we punched the ticket with the guy, and he said, hey, there's the room, there's the theater, go to that one right there, walk through that door, that's your movie. So we went in there, ate our popcorn. You know, you're halfway done with the popcorn before the previews are even done, right? We're done with the popcorn, and the lights go down, we're getting excited, here's the moment, and the screen turns on, right? Zombie thriller, I'm expecting some creepy hand to come across the screen, some thriller, dark music, and to my surprise, there's like some birds that fly across the screen, kind of like almost like a Disney film, like tweet, 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 and I'm like, okay, this is a little weird start. Bluest sky, they're like creating an ideal day. There's people with like these bright colors that are like running around and kind of dancing a little bit, and then they start to sing. I'm thinking, this is a weird start to a zombie movie, but start real bright, and then the zombies come out of nowhere. Okay, I'm tracking with you, I'm tracking. And so we're watching this, and then they kind of go into a stadium, and they do a very famous old song, and we realize, it dawns on us, that we are in the wrong movie. And you have two decisions to make at that point, right? You can kind of embarrass yourself, maybe it's internal embarrassment, and kind of walk out as a group knowing that you walked into the wrong movie, or you get your singing voice ready and you sit there and you get ready to sing. We decided to opt out of the movie. And as we were on our way to the right door, the right theater, we kind of asked ourselves, like, what happened? Like, we followed the directions, we walked through the door, it seemed right, it looked right, you're sitting in the seat, the popcorn was right, but we went through this door and ended up in a place that we didn't expect to be at. We were in the wrong place. And when I talk with people, I have people tell me a paradigm of this, an example of this all the time, every week. They're like, I was living my life, I took someone's advice, I went through a door, I thought it was the door that was gonna lead me to the place and to become the person that I want to be and the life I want to have. I went through that door, it gave me it for a little bit, but now I've realized that I'm in the wrong place. And there's something profound that I've learned about that simple reality. And here's what I've learned, that the wrong door can never lead you to the right place. It can never lead you there. As much as you want it, I could close the door, open, like, is it different? It's like, no, because this wrong door is gonna lead to one specific place, so I need to find the right door. And every week I talk with people that are telling me some version of the wrong door they walked through and how they really want a life on the other end that's more fulfilling and more satisfying, but they just can't seem to find it. And oftentimes they're discouraged and maybe even hopeless. If you're right now in a situation where you look at your life and you're not fully satisfied with your life, you don't feel like you're living a very full life, or you're wrestling with maybe an emptiness in it, let me tell you, you may feel those emotions and you may be very discouraged, but let me encourage you with something. Jesus makes it really simple for us. He says, I am the door that leads you to the life that you want. It's not complicated. It's not mysterious. He makes it incredibly simple that everybody that's living their life trying different doors needs to try Jesus, the door, and he will ultimately lead us to the life that we're looking for. Simple. Simple. And so we are in a series called the I Am series. A lot of people in this season are trying to figure out who Jesus really is. A lot of things said about him online, a lot of things said about him by our culture and by people around us. But if we really want to know who Jesus is, the best way to figure that out is, well, what does Jesus claim about himself? Who does he say that he is? And Jesus, throughout the Gospels, shares 7 I am statements where he declares that he is something to help us understand who he is so that we can have the life that we want through him. Join me in John chapter 10 as Jesus identifies an I am statement about himself here. John chapter 10, verse 1 says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the one who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep," this is like the sheep pen, "but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But the one who enters by the door, who comes in the right way, is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep listen to his voice, and he calls his own sheep," I love this, "by name, and leads them out. When he puts all of his own sheep outside of the pen, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. However, the opposite, a stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus told them this figure of speech, but they did not understand what the things which he was saying to them meant." Then he says in verse 7, his statement of identity. Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly," saying this is a fact you can rely on, is why Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep." So if you're looking for this life, it's not just about a door, right? Because a door opens and closes, it leads us to somewhere. And what Jesus is going to lead us and guide us to is understanding, hey, I'm saying I am the door, I am the way, but on the other side of that is the life that you're looking for, and you can only have it through me. So if you're taking notes this morning and you're looking for that full life, that's what you want in this next season, that's what you want right now. I want you to write this down. To have that full life, we need to step into true life. Jesus here is speaking to the reality that all of us encounter all of these different doors. And I want you to see the picture because he's painting a figure of speech or a metaphor for us to understand deeper truth. Jesus, all throughout his teachings, was teaching about profound spiritual things from heaven and would use spiritual pictures to help us understand, physical pictures to understand spiritual things. So he's using imagery that they would understand in their day. He's speaking to a blind man, Pharisees, his disciples, and the crowd, and they would have been very familiar with what he's talking about with sheep. And so he says, hey, listen, it's like a shepherd, and there's this sheep pen, usually built with rock, with an opening, and he says, there's sheep inside of that, and the shepherd, when he wants to go see his sheep, walks right through the door. But there's other people that if you go in another way, let's say you jump over it or you sneak over the wall where the sheep are and you're in with the sheep, he says, just because you're with the sheep doesn't mean you're a sheep. And I'll even take it one step further because Jesus is really rebuking highly religious people that were spiritually blind. How many of you know you can be very religious and spiritually blind? And he's saying, in essence, you can actually not only be in the sheep and not be a sheep, you can be amongst the sheep and not be the shepherd. And why he's saying this, he's trying to differentiate between who he is and who the other religious shepherds of his day were claiming to be. These people of Jesus' day, not all of them, but a lot of them, were misleading people, and they were trying to teach people a heavy rules-based religion that kept people from the heart of God. Do this, do that. Everything needs to be perfect, everything. You got to work for it. God, you just got to be perfect. So much so that in the previous verse, there's no break between chapter 9 and chapter 10. In the previous verses, Jesus heals a man that's been blind for his entire life. And when Jesus heals him, he does a loogie. That's how I imagine Jesus did it. spits on the dirt, gets down, mixes it up and makes mud, and puts the mud over this blind man's eye and said, go to the river and wash your face. When the blind man washes his face, he can now see for the very first time in his life. First time in his life, he can see. And you would expect that everyone would be like, yeah, Jesus. The most religious people that were experts in the law, which is the Bible, the Torah, that knew it, most of them had memorized the first 5 books of the Torah by memory. You know what their response was? They were not celebrating because of the healing. Their issue was, but did you see Jesus spit? This guy's like, it's blue. The clouds. That's a leaf. Wow, I heard people tell me about it. And they're like, look at that mud. And what their issue is that Jesus broke a rule in their mind because Jesus spit, did this, which is work. So he broke the Sabbath, so he violated God's law. And their whole issue in the whole chapter is, but did it really happen? Jesus must be a demonic person. They have this huge issue, and Jesus finishes the chapter and he says, oh, you Pharisees. He says, you have no idea that you are more blind than the man that was blind. You're more blind than he was. He was physically blind, but you are blind spiritually. And these verses proceed right after that. So I want you to know that the Pharisees that are listening, they are enraged by the way that he's called them blind because they think that they see. Oh man, the greatest blindness is often realizing is often thinking that you can see. The greatest blindness. They thought that they could see because they knew the word. And Jesus looks at them and says, you're so blind. Look at the way you live. I heal someone and you just rip his life apart. Kick him out of the synagogue. And Jesus is referring to the thieves and the robbers here being the Pharisees. He says, you are like thieves and robbers. And there's a difference between robbers and thieves. Robbers steal openly. Think about somebody with a gun. It's forcefully. It's with force. It's in the open. Give me your stuff and you run off. Thieves is the word klepto. It's more secret. It's someone that steals from you in secret and you don't really know it. I talked with somebody not too long ago. He was at a coffee shop downtown and he was studying and somebody came up to the table with a sign trying to kind of sell him something. He said, hey, do you want this thing? And this guy was like, no, I think I'm okay. And the guy was kind of pushy. No, like, do you want this thing? Like, no, not right now. I'm just studying. I'm okay. And kind of moved the sign in a weird way and then walked off. And my friend, about 30 minutes later, started seeing all these pings on his phone that were charges to his bank account. And the guy had used this sign to secretly move the wallet over so the guy could grab the wallet. And my friend didn't even know that he was stolen from until his credit card and his money was being spent. There's people in this room right now that are trying to live the abundant life that God has for you, and you don't even realize there's things in your life that are stealing from you. Some of you, that's old religious mindsets. You think that you still have to work to be right before God. And so you're like trying to do more good. And it's like, it's this constant battle. I got to do more good, but I swore this week, so now I got to give. And I slept with my boyfriend, so now I got to go to church 2 more times. And you try to outweigh this. Can I tell you what that leads to? Spiritual exhaustion. That is not what God, but it robs you of your joy. Because you always feel like you're behind, trying to catch up and dig your way out of a hole to be right before God. That is not what God has for you. That is a form of stealing your joy from you and the life that God has for you. And I want you to go through your life and ask yourself that question. Is there anything in my life that may even seem good that is robbing me of living the life that God has called me to? What I love about Jesus here is he's saying, oh, I'm not taking from you. What I offer you is I give you my life. I'm not stealing anything from you. This is no con. I don't have to convince you. What I promise you behind that door is the real deal. And if you trust me and go to that door, the life that you longed for and looked for in all of these other places, you will finally find it. Because I am not an option, I am the option. He says that this life is only found through him. It's not doing all of these other things or knocking on these other doors. It is only found through Jesus, who says, I am the door. If you want to be part of my spiritual family, if you want to have your sins forgiven, if you want to be made new, if you want to live a new life, you can't jump the fence through religious actions or by going to the food pantry. You can't jump it. You have to come to me and say, I am blind and I am lost. But if you would take in somebody like me, and it's that reality and realization that you are blind and lost with faith that God accepts you into his family. You can never come to God until you realize you're blind. The Pharisees were not looking for the door that Jesus was. He was standing in front of them, but they didn't think they were blind. So if you don't think you're blind or lost or sick, Jesus says, then you'll never go to the doctor. But it's starting by saying, I'm not living the life that I want to live. I'm not where I want to be. And I've tried to do it in my own. Maybe I should go to Jesus, because what Jesus tells me is that he is the door, and that whoever enters through this door, that this person will be saved from a lot of the garbage, the misery, the brokenness, because you will find the eternal life that only comes through Jesus Christ. But Jesus doesn't just save us, and this is an eternal sense, by the way. This is forgiveness and washing of your sins because you trust in Jesus Christ and what he's done on the cross. But he also saves us into something. Listen to what he says in verse 3. This is going back to the imagery. To Jesus, the doorkeeper, the shepherd, the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep, this is speaking of Jesus, the sheep listen to the shepherd Jesus' voice. And he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he puts all of his own sheep outside, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. It's not only stepping into the true life and realizing that Jesus is the door that leads to that life, but here's the other thing. If you want to walk in that life, not just in eternity, but in every day, you need to follow the shepherd. There's faith, but faith that is real always acts. Always. They say, I really believe. But if you really believe, that will spur you and move you to act and live in a different way. If you don't really believe, then you'll never act different. James says, if you have faith but you don't act, your faith is dead. You don't really believe. If you would live in a different way. Our life is our fruit of what we believe. But as he talks here, and he makes a note for us to understand. Remember, the shepherd is Jesus. He makes a note for us to understand about Jesus and who Jesus is. And I love this because it's the opposite of what the enemy is. The enemy calls us by our failures. He calls us by our mistakes. He calls us by our sin. He calls us by our past. He loves to bring up who you used to be and the things that you're ashamed of and tie that to your identity. Because if you can tie it to your identity, he can keep you bound. But here's what I love about Jesus. Jesus doesn't call you by your mistakes or your failures or any sin that you've done. Jesus calls you by your name. By your name. Your personal name that your parents gave you. Jesus is like, I know you so much that I know your very name. And when I call you to myself, I don't say, child that I've created, creation of the earth. I say your name. That means I know you, and I knit you in your mother's womb. And I know your story, and I know your failures. I know it, but I don't call you by it. I call you out by your name. in a room, in a crowd this big, if I say people or sons and daughters, that's a lot of people in this room. But if I call you by your name, Alejandro Ortega, you say, how does he know my name? No one calls me by my full name. Jesus knows your name. And I want you to know that this is talking about in a case of salvation, that when he calls you to himself, he calls you by your very name. And calls you out of your mess, out of your darkness, from that path behind that door that you are unsatisfied, and he calls your name by. But here's the thing, you will never follow the one that calls you by name if you don't recognize his voice. The distinguisher by people that respond to the voice of God or don't is, do you acknowledge and recognize it's the voice of God? Because if you don't recognize that it's your shepherd calling, you'll never respond. But if you say, what is that voice? And it's the craziest thing, because it's, if you've never known Christ, it's a voice you've never heard but calls you and sounds familiar. It's a voice that knows you in a way, the person that knows you in a way, and it's a voice that calls you to become his. He knows your name. He's not ashamed of you. He's calling you to himself. But not only does he know his name, one of the responsibility of a shepherd is they know your name, which indicates that a shepherd cares for you. This shepherd cares. Jesus cares for your life. The sheep would all be brought in to a sheep pen at nighttime, and the shepherd would sleep in that opening. There was no door. So they lay in that. Why? Because the shepherd feels responsibility to protect and guard the sheep from people that may steal or wolves that may try to kill. Do you know that's how Jesus is with you? That he leads you, and he's like, it's like nighttime, let's put you in here, and you're going through a seat, and he just goes, you're worried, and you're like kind of moving around, and Jesus is like, don't worry, I'm at the door. No one can get into you without going through me. You're protected, you're safe, you don't have to worry. And there's an inner sense of just this, okay, this shepherd, I know that Jesus, no matter what I go through, he knows my name and he cares for me. And if he cares for me and loves me, then he protects me. So no matter what I go through in life, it may be super overwhelming, but I know that Jesus is guarding the door and keeping me safe. So no matter what I go through, I know that it has to go through him first. Has to go through him first. I encounter all different types of things. I had somebody recently come in here, and he may be in the service or not be in the service, doesn't matter. But I had somebody go in the prayer room with me. I was praying a few weeks back, and somebody came in, and he said, I want to pray. I said, yeah, of course, we'll pray with you. And he said, I said, okay. Well, he tried to start showing me this dollar and all this stuff, and then he said, I want you to. He said, I'm okay if you pray, but I want to pray in Lucifer's name. I said, I'll pray for you, but I won't pray in Lucifer's name. He said, because I'm a Luciferian. And I don't know if you've ever encountered somebody that walks in that type of darkness, but I want you to know that they try to intimidate and use fear. It's always a tactic of the enemy. It's not my first time I've encountered things like this. They try to, he's not in there, for prayer. He's in there to intimidate and to mess with. And I looked at him. I want you to know that I just felt so confident. You know why? Not because I'm big and bad, but because I have the shepherd right next to me. I'm not nervous. I'm not concerned. I'm not, they're always a facade and an impersonation of the true light. I'm a light bringer. I said, you're not a light bringer. But I said, I'm so glad that you're here today. I said, I'm so glad you're here. I said, first, I want you to know that there's hope in Jesus Christ. I want you to know that he can take you out of any path. He can redeem you. He can restore you. He can cleanse you. There's no one. You could have pledged your life to Satan. You're not too far away from God to forgive you. But I said, I also want you to know something. I'm glad you're here. I said, I'm glad the enemy crawled out of the shadows to come and see what God is doing in this place, because you're losing ground. You're losing ground, and God is pushing his kingdom forward. But that doesn't come from, I feel big and bad, I know the Bible. That comes from, I know who's standing in front of me. I have a shepherd that is strong, that is the almighty God of the universe, that is over all powers, that when his name is proclaimed, demons shudder and tremble. I'm not afraid of the other powers that is out there. I'm aware of the spiritual battle that we're in, but I don't tremble in fear because of somebody that comes in a name that's powerful, because I know a greater name than that. There is a shepherd that will not allow the darkness to take away his sheep. And it builds a confidence in you as a person to go, this is not just poetry. This is reality that I live my life by. I didn't lose any sleep because my trust is in my shepherd that protects and guards me at all times. But I want you to know this. That for some of you, you've made that decision, right? You've crossed the line. You know the shepherd. You've walked through that door. But let me tell you something. Some of you, even though you've walked through the door and experienced some of that life, you're not living it right now because you've strayed. Because if you can follow, then you can stray. If you can hear his voice, then you can ignore his voice. And all of us are listening to different voices. All of us. Hopefully not the one in your head, but we're all listening to voices. But I want you to know this, voices, I think about it a little bit like a GPS, right? Me and my wife are driving downtown, and I don't know about what it is when I drive downtown, but my GPS freaks out. Lower Wacker Drive, anybody? Yeah. It's like I'm down there, I'm like, where am I going? GPS is like, right over here. Right over here. This is where you're going. This is where you're going. So lost downtown. And I was down there with my wife a few weeks ago, and we came to this point where it was up and down. You had to make a choice. And I was like, babe, interpret this for me. What is this saying? GPS is just going straight. Right there, straight, right down the middle. And I'm like, babe, it's up and down. It's a choice here, and it's saying straight. And she's like, I don't know. It's just, I think straight. Like, you're my navigation partner here. Help me. So I went straight up. And I was trying to get on the highway, and I very quickly realized I was in the wrong place and ended up at a dead end. Now, thankfully, that's not the end of the story, and that's not how GPSs just don't go loser, over. Right? Like you missed it and it just shuts down. No. Right? What happens when you miss it, you take a moment and you pause, and then it redirects you so that you can get back on the path that you're supposed to be on. I want you to know that Jesus' voice is like the GPS, where he is guiding you every step of the way. When you get to a turn that you don't know, it's not like, I just hope Jesus goes, take a right, go straight, take a left. He's guiding you through his word. He's guiding you through his relationship. But a shepherd always guides his sheep. It's part of his responsibility. Now, let me tell you what happens some of the times, though. Sometimes Jesus goes, okay, you need to take a right here. And we go, I think straight is right. And you keep going that way. And Jesus is like, no, take a right. And you're like, I really want what's there. I think that's the right choice. Take a right, and you miss it. And when you miss it, God doesn't go, sorry, figure it out for yourself. He reroutes you right back on to where you need to go. He says, you're lost. Some of us even blame it on God. Like, God, why'd you let me go here? And God's like, are you kidding me? I told you to turn 10 times and you kept going straight. But he doesn't condemn us. How could you? You always mess up. You blow it. You're a failure. You're at a dead end again. 10 dead ends in a row. No, God goes, turn around. Turn around. And one of the things we do sometimes is when God is speaking to us, because if you know him, he always speaks to you. But if he's speaking to us, what we do is if we don't want to listen to him, we start muting. You can't fully mute God's voice, but you can lower the volume. It's turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around. We're just driving. Just turn around. That's not it. It's not what I have for you. Turn around. And we end up in a mess, in a problem, and it's in a bad relationship, and we're thinking about ending our life. And Jesus is like, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around. I have something better for you, more full, better. You need to turn around, though. I am not going to dictate your life for you, but I am going to call you to turn around. Turn around. You turn, you turn, you turn. And is that whisper, that is how the shepherd leads you. He calls you to himself. A U-turn is called repentance, and the obedience is back on the path because he wants you to live the fullness of life that only comes from when you listen to the voice of the shepherd. Oh, if you're not where you want to be, let me tell you, it's not without hope because he's still whispering to you, turn around. Turn around. So I sometimes talk with people and they say, so far away. You have no idea what I've lost. My family, everyone's abandoned me. You have no, and Jesus, even when our family abandons us, even when everybody turns away from us, I want you to know, I talk with people, their kids don't want to talk with them. Their wife doesn't want to talk with them. They're broken. They're trapped in the pit of a dead end. And Jesus is still there calling them back. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. And his goal is always to lead us to the pasture where our soul can find rest, fulfillment, provision. What we need is always found when we follow the shepherd, because he always leads us to the right place. And he doesn't just give us enough. I love this. Listen to what the final verses say. He doesn't just give us enough. He gives us more than enough, overflow. Listen to the final verses, 9. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. I want you to remember that language. The thief, speaking of the devil, comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came so that they would have life and have it enough, barely, just getting by. Abundant life, abundantly. This is what God wants us for us. And if you're taking notes, the final thing is he wants us to live in overflow. It is not his desire that you would barely get through life. One of the greatest lies I think the enemy sells people that we believe, because we think so much about heaven and hell, is that the life that Jesus came to bring is we only get it when we die and go to heaven. And it's like, oh, heaven, I just can't wait. Hey, listen, heaven, oh, it's going to be amazing. No eye has seen, right? But can I tell you this? The language that Jesus uses here is very clear. When he says, my sheep will go in and out, that language speaks to daily living.